The desert sun scorched Fort Irwin, California, relentless as a drill sergeant's bark, and Private First Class Ethan Caldwell's boots crunched against the gravel like a heartbeat out of rhythm. He was 24, lean, with eyes that carried the weight of a childhood spent dodging fists in a small Ohio town. Today, though, it wasn't the heat or memories that unsettled him. It was the letter tucked in his pocket, its edges worn from rereading, each word a grenade threatening to detonate his carefully guarded world. Ethan had joined the army to escape, to become someone unbreakable, someone who could face any enemy, external or internal. Fort Irwin, a sprawling base in the Mojave Desert, was his proving ground, where soldiers trained for war in a landscape as unforgiving as their discipline. But the letter from his younger brother, Jamie, wasn't about war. It was about love, and it was tearing Ethan apart. "I'm gay, Ethan," Jamie had written. "I'm scared you'll hate me for it." The words stung worse than any shrapnel, not because Ethan judged him, but because they forced him to confront a truth he'd buried since he was 16. He was gay too, and he'd spent years running from it. The barracks were a maze of routine. Reveille at 0500, PT in the dust-choked dawn, and endless drills under the watchful eyes of Sergeant First Class Maria Delgado, a no-nonsense woman whose sharp tongue could cut through steel. Ethan admired her, envied her certainty. His squad was a tight unit. Private Malik Jones, a wisecracking Brooklynite who could make anyone laugh. Specialist Lena Kowalski, a medic with a soft spot for stray dogs, and Private Ryan Navarro, the quiet Texan who always seemed to be watching Ethan a little too closely. Ryan, with his curly black hair and steady gaze, was the kind of soldier who never faltered, yet his silences carried a weight Ethan couldn't decipher. That evening, after a grueling day of maneuvers, Ethan slipped away to the base's small park, a patch of grass and benches near the flagpole, an oasis in the desert's harshness. He pulled out Jamie's letter, the words blurring as he read them again. "You're my hero, Ethan. Please don't turn away." His chest tightened. How could he be a hero when he was too afraid to be honest with himself? The army was his shield, its rules his armor. Don't ask, don't tell was long repealed, but the culture hadn't fully shifted. Whispers about weakness still lingered in the mess hall, and Ethan had seen what happened to soldiers who didn't fit the mold. "Hey, Caldwell, you hiding from Delgado's next rant?" Ryan's voice broke through, low and warm. Ethan startled, shoving the letter into his pocket. Ryan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his silhouette framed by the fading sunlight. At 25, Ryan was all steady strength, but his eyes held a softness that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "Just needed air," Ethan muttered, avoiding Ryan's gaze. He expected Ryan to leave, but instead, the other soldier sat beside him on the bench, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken questions. "You've been off lately," Ryan said finally, his voice careful. "Not just tired. Something's eating you." Ethan's jaw clenched. He wanted to deflect, to throw up the walls he'd built over years of hiding. But Ryan's presence was disarming, like a crack in his defenses he hadn't noticed before. "It's personal," he said, the words rough. "Family stuff." Ryan nodded, not pushing, but he didn't leave either. They sat there as the sky turned golden, the desert cooling around them. Ethan's fingers brushed the letter in his pocket, and for reasons he couldn't name, he spoke. "My brother, he's struggling. Came out to me. I don't know how to help him when I'm—" He stopped, heart pounding. "When I'm the same." The confession hung on the edge of his tongue, but fear clamped it shut. Ryan turned to him, his expression unreadable. "You're a good brother, Ethan. You'll figure it out. Just don't shut him out." There was something in Ryan's tone, something knowing, that made Ethan's stomach twist. Did Ryan suspect? Had he seen through Ethan's carefully crafted mask? That night, in the dim barracks, Ethan lay awake, Jamie's letter under his pillow. He thought of Ryan's words, the way they lingered like a melody he couldn't shake. For the first time, he wondered if hardness wasn't the only strength a soldier could have. But the thought terrified him as much as it intrigued him, because opening that door meant risking everything. His career, his squad, his identity. In the army, weakness was the enemy, and love, to Ethan, felt like surrender. The next morning, drills resumed with brutal intensity. Delgado barked orders as the squad navigated a mock urban combat zone, sweat soaking their fatigues. Ethan's focus wavered, his mind split between Jamie's letter and Ryan's quiet presence beside him. During a break, Malik cracked a joke about the heat, but Ethan barely heard it. His eyes kept drifting to Ryan, who was cleaning his rifle with methodical care. When Ryan looked up and caught his gaze, Ethan's breath hitched. There was no judgment in Ryan's eyes, only a question. One Ethan wasn't ready to answer. As the day ended, Ethan found himself back at the park, the letter in his hands again. He didn't notice Ryan approaching until he was there, sitting beside him once more. "You're gonna wear that paper out," Ryan said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Ethan exhaled, a half laugh, half sigh. "It's complicated." Ryan leaned back, his voice soft but firm. "Life's complicated, man. Doesn't mean you run from it." The words hit harder than Ethan expected, like a challenge he couldn't ignore. He looked at Ryan, really looked at him, and saw something he hadn't before. A flicker of vulnerability, a mirror of his own. For a moment, the desert, the base, the rules, they all faded. It was just them, two soldiers carrying burdens too heavy to name. And in that moment, Ethan felt the first crack in the hardness he'd clung to for so long. The days at Fort Irwin blurred into a haze of sweat and routine, but Ethan couldn't shake the conversation with Ryan. It clung to him, like dust on his boots, stirring something restless inside. He'd always thought strength meant silence, meant locking away the parts of himself that didn't fit the soldier's mold. But Ryan's words, "Life's complicated, man. Doesn't mean you run from it," echoed in his head, challenging everything he'd built his life around. Training intensified as the squad prepared for a week-long field exercise, a simulated deployment in the desert's unforgiving terrain. Ethan threw himself into it, hoping the grind would drown out his thoughts. But even as he hauled gear through choking sandstorms, his mind wandered, to Jamie, to the letter, to Ryan's steady presence. He wrote back to his brother that night, his pen trembling over the paper. "I'm proud of you, Jamie," he wrote. "I'm not turning away." He didn't mention his own truth, not yet. The words felt too raw, too dangerous. In the field, the squad moved as one, their training a dance of precision. Malik's jokes kept morale high, Lena patched up scrapes with her usual efficiency, and Delgado's commands were a constant anchor. But Ryan was different. He was quieter than usual, his eyes lingering on Ethan during breaks. Once, as they set up a perimeter, Ryan handed Ethan a canteen, their fingers brushing. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through Ethan, like a spark in dry grass. He pulled away, muttering a thanks, and busied himself with his gear. But Ryan's gaze stayed with him, heavy and searching. The exercise was grueling, long nights under a starless sky, the cold biting through their sleeping bags. On the third night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He slipped out of his tent, the desert air sharp against his skin, and found Ryan sitting by a small fire, his silhouette carved against the darkness. "Can't sleep either?" Ryan asked, his voice low. Ethan hesitated, then sat beside him, the fire's warmth a small comfort. "Just thinking," he said, "about home, my brother." Ryan nodded, poking the fire with a stick. You said he's struggling. You want to talk about it? Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to, more than he'd admit, but the words felt like a betrayal of the walls he'd built. Instead, he deflected. What about you? You got family back in Texas. Ryan's smile was faint, tinged with something Ethan couldn't place. Yeah, mom and a sister. They're complicated too. He paused, then added, my dad wasn't big on feelings. Thought they made you soft. I learned early to keep things to myself. Ethan recognized the weight in Ryan's voice. It was the same burden he carried. Yeah, he said quietly. I get that. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Ethan felt the letter in his pocket, its words a tether to Jamie, to the truth he wasn't ready to face. But Ryan's presence was a different kind of tether, one that made him want to be brave in a way he'd never been before. You ever feel like you're hiding from yourself? Ethan asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Ryan looked at him, his eyes reflecting the firelight. All the time, he said softly. But sometimes, you find someone who makes hiding feel like a waste. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan's heart pounded, a mix of fear and longing. He wanted to ask what Ryan meant, to bridge the gap between them, but the firelight faded, and the moment passed. They returned to their tents, the desert swallowing their unspoken truths. Back at the base, life resumed its rhythm, but Ethan felt a shift. Ryan's words stayed with him, a quiet challenge to the hardness he'd clung to. During a rare day off, the squad gathered at the rec center, playing cards and swapping stories. Malik teased Lena about her terrible poker face, and even Delgado cracked a smile. Ethan watched Ryan across the table, laughing at one of Malik's jokes, and felt a pang he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, something that scared him as much as it drew him in. Later, as they walked back to the barracks, Ryan fell into step beside him. You're different out here, Ryan said, his voice casual but pointed. Less guarded. I like it. Ethan's stomach flipped. Don't get used to it, he said, trying for humor but failing to hide the tremor in his voice. Ryan stopped, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not, he said. Just don't be afraid to be you. The words hit like a punch, and Ethan stood frozen, caught between fear and the pull of something real. He wanted to say something, anything, but the barracks loomed ahead, and the moment slipped away. That night, he wrote to Jamie again, the words coming easier this time. I'm trying to be brave, like you, he wrote. I think I'm getting there. The Mojave sun was merciless, but Ethan's real battle was internal. Ryan's words, don't be afraid to be you, had cracked something open, and now doubt seeped through like water through a dam. He'd spent years building a fortress around his heart, convinced that vulnerability was a liability. But Ryan's steady presence, his quiet strength, was dismantling that fortress brick by brick. A new mission loomed, a joint training exercise with a unit from Fort Bragg. The squad was on edge, the pressure to perform palpable. Delgado drilled them harder, her voice a whip cracking through the heat. Ethan threw himself into the work, but his focus frayed. During a night patrol simulation, he missed a signal, nearly costing the squad their position. Delgado tore into him, her words sharp but fair. Get your head in the game, Caldwell, or you're a liability. Malik clapped him on the shoulder later, trying to lighten the mood. You good, man? You've been spacing out like you're on Mars. Ethan forced a grin. Just tired. But it was more than that. He was tired of hiding, tired of the weight of his secret. He caught Ryan watching him from across the training ground, his expression unreadable, and Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to talk to him, to explain, but fear kept him silent. That evening, Ethan found himself at the park again. The letter from Jamie, a constant companion. He was rereading it when Lena approached, her medic bag slung over her shoulder. "You look like you're carrying the world," she said, sitting beside him. Her voice was gentle, a contrast to her usual brisk efficiency. Ethan shrugged, but Lena's eyes were sharp. "You don't have to tell me," she said. "But whatever it is, you're not alone. We're a squad, yeah." Her words were kind, but they only deepened Ethan's isolation. He wasn't ready to share. Not with Lena, not with anyone, except maybe Ryan. But Ryan was a risk, a leap into the unknown. Ethan thanked Lena and watched her leave, the letter heavy in his hands. The joint exercise began, a chaotic blend of strategy and grit. Ethan's squad worked alongside the Fort Bragg unit, their coordination tested under simulated combat. Ryan was a natural leader, his calm commands steadying the team. But during a tense moment, when a miscommunication led to a mock ambush, Ethan froze, his mind flashing to Jamie's letter, to Ryan's words, to the truth he couldn't face. Ryan pulled him aside after, his voice low but firm. "You're better than this, Ethan. What's going on?" Ethan's defenses cracked. "I don't know how to do this," he blurted. "My brother, he's like me, and I'm scared of what it means, what people will think." Ryan's eyes softened, but he didn't look away. "You're not your fear," he said, "and you're not alone." The words were a lifeline, but Ethan wasn't ready to grab it. He nodded, throat tight, and they rejoined the squad. The exercise ended in success, but Ethan felt like he'd failed. He was a soldier trained to face danger, but this, his own heart, was a battlefield he didn't know how to navigate. Back at the base, the squad celebrated with beers at the rec center. Malik led a toast, his grin infectious, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere. He slipped outside, needing air, and found Ryan leaning against a wall, staring at the stars. "You're making a habit of this," Ryan said, a teasing edge to his voice. Ethan managed to smile. "Maybe I just like the company." Ryan's laugh was soft, but his eyes were serious. "You don't have to carry it all alone, you know, whatever it is." Ethan's heart raced. He wanted to tell Ryan everything. About Jamie, about himself, about the fear that kept him silent. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he said, "Thanks for being there." Ryan's hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that felt like a promise. "Any time," he said, and Ethan felt the world shift, just a little. The base settled into a rare quiet, the joint exercise behind them. Ethan's squad was given a weekend pass, and most scattered Malik to visit family in Los Angeles, Lena to a nearby animal shelter. Ethan stayed, unable to face the world beyond the base's gates. He told himself it was exhaustion, but deep down, he knew it was fear of confronting the truth Ryan seemed to see so clearly. Saturday morning, Ethan found Ryan at the gym, lifting weights with a focus that bordered on meditative. Ethan hesitated, then joined him, the clank of metal and their shared silence a strange comfort. "You didn't go anywhere?" Ethan asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Ryan shrugged, setting down a dumbbell. "Didn't feel like it." "You?" "Same." Ethan paused, then added, "Thought I'd stick around. Clear my head." Ryan's eyes met his, steady and knowing. "You've been trying to do that a lot lately." Ethan laughed, a brittle sound. "Yeah, well, it's not working." They finished their workout, the air thick with unspoken words. Afterward, Ryan suggested a hike in the nearby hills, a rare chance to escape the base's confines. Ethan agreed, desperate for a distraction. The trail was rugged, the desert stretching endlessly around them, but the quiet was soothing. They walked in companionable silence, the crunch of gravel under their boots the only sound. At a lookout point, they stopped, the view a stark expanse of sand and sky. Ryan sat on a boulder, his expression thoughtful. "You ever think about what makes a soldier?" he asked. "Not just the training, the fighting. The why." Ethan frowned, caught off guard. "Duty, I guess. Protecting people." Ryan nodded, but his eyes were distant. "Yeah, but sometimes I think it's about protecting who you are, too. Not losing that." Ethan's heart thudded. He wanted to ask what Ryan meant, to spill everything. His fear, his truth, his growing feelings. But the words stuck, heavy as the desert heat. Instead, he said, "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." Ryan's smile was wistful. "More than you know." They hiked back in silence, but the distance between them felt smaller, like a bridge half built. That night, Ethan wrote to Jamie again, his words more honest this time. "I'm scared, but I'm trying. There's someone here, he makes me want to be braver." He didn't send the letter, not yet. Felt too big, too real. Monday brought a new challenge. A leadership course Delgado insisted they all take. Ethan struggled, his mind torn between duty and the pull of his heart. Ryan excelled, his calm confidence a beacon. During a team-building exercise, they were paired together, tasked with navigating a rope course blindfolded, one guiding the other. Ethan went first, Ryan's voice steady in his ear, guiding him through each step. "Trust me," Ryan said, and Ethan did, his heart racing for reasons beyond the challenge. When it was Ryan's turn, Ethan guided him, their roles reversed. As Ryan reached the end, he pulled off the blindfold, his grin wide. "Not bad, Caldwell." Ethan laughed, the sound freer than he'd felt in weeks. For a moment it was just them, the world falling away. But reality returned with Delgado's sharp whistle, and they rejoined the squad, the moment lingering like a promise. That evening, Ethan found Ryan at the park, a leather journal in his hands. "You write?" Ethan asked, surprised. Ryan nodded, a little shy. "Helps me think. You should try it." Ethan sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. He wanted to ask about the journal, about Ryan's thoughts, about everything. But fear held him back, a familiar enemy. Instead, he said, "Maybe I will." Ryan's eyes met his, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw his own longing reflected back. The desert night was cool, the stars bright above them, and Ethan felt the first stirrings of courage, fragile but real. The days grew shorter, the desert nights colder, but Ethan's world felt warmer, lit by the spark of Ryan's presence. He still carried Jamie's letter, its words a reminder of the courage he needed to find. But now, Ryan's journal was a new fixation, its worn cover a mystery Ethan wanted to unravel. He'd seen Ryan writing in it, his expression soft, unguarded. A side of him Ethan craved to know. A new assignment came, a night navigation exercise in the desert, testing their skills under pressure. Ethan's squad was paired with another, and tensions ran high. During a planning session, Malik clashed with a soldier from the other unit, a brash sergeant named Carter who threw around slurs like they were nothing. When Carter sneered about soft soldiers, Ethan's blood ran cold, the word hitting too close to home. Ryan stepped in, his voice calm but steel-edged, shutting Carter down without escalating. Ethan watched, mixing with gratitude, and realized Ryan's strength wasn't just physical. It was in his refusal to let hate slide. Later, as they set up camp, Ethan pulled Ryan aside. "Thanks for that," he said, his voice low. "Carter's an ass." Ryan shrugged, but his eyes were serious. "He's not worth your energy. You're better than that." The words stirred something in Ethan, a mix of pride and longing. He wanted to be better, not just for himself, but for Ryan, for Jamie. That night, under a sky thick with stars, Ethan found Ryan by the campfire again, his journal open. What do you write about? Ethan asked, unable to hold back. Ryan hesitated, then handed him the journal. Read it, if you want. Ethan's hands shook as he opened it. The pages were filled with poetry, raw and honest, about fear, hope, and love. One line stood out. Love is a battlefield, but it's one worth fighting for. Ethan's throat tightened. This is your good, he said, handing it back. Ryan's smile was shy. It's just me, the real me. The words hit Ethan like a revelation. He wanted to be real, too, but fear still held him back. Ryan, he started, his voice barely a whisper. I'm like my brother. I'm gay. The confession hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. Ryan's eyes softened, and he reached out, his hand resting on Ethan's. I know, he said quietly, and I'm glad you told me. Ethan's heart stopped, then raced. You knew. Ryan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. I see you, Ethan, and I feel the same. The world tilted, the desert fading around them. Ethan wanted to say more, to bridge the gap, but fear still lingered. Ryan's hand was warm, grounding, and for the first time, Ethan felt like he could breathe. They sat there, hands touching, the fire crackling, and Ethan knew this was a turning point, a victory he hadn't expected. The next day, the exercise continued, but Ethan felt lighter, braver. He caught Ryan's eye during a drill, and the smile they shared was a secret only they understood. But the high didn't last. Carter's unit was still a problem, his comments growing bolder. When he cornered Ethan during a break, his words venomous. You and Navarro seem real close, huh? Ethan's fists clenched, but Ryan was there, stepping between them, his presence a shield. Let it go, Carter, Ryan said, his voice calm but unyielding. Carter backed off, but the tension lingered, a reminder of the world they lived in. Ethan realized then that courage wasn't just about coming out. It was about standing up, again and again, no matter the cost. The final days of the exercise were a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion, but Ethan carried a new strength. Ryan's confession, I feel the same, was a beacon, guiding him through the chaos. He'd spent years believing love was a weakness, a flaw to be hidden. But now, with Ryan by his side, he saw it differently. Love was a victory, a defiance of fear. The squad returned to Fort Irwin, their bonds tighter, their spirits high. But Carter's presence was a shadow, his whispers spreading through the other unit. Ethan felt the weight of eyes on him, the sting of judgment. During a debrief, Carter made a pointed remark about distractions in the squad, his gaze flicking to Ethan and Ryan. Delgado shut it down, her authority absolute, but Ethan's stomach churned. He knew the rumors could spread, could ruin everything. That night, Ethan found Ryan at the park, the journal open on the bench. You okay? Ryan asked, his voice soft. Ethan shook his head. Carter's trouble. I don't want us to mess things up for you. Ryan's eyes darkened. You think I care what Carter thinks? Or anyone? I'm not hiding, Ethan. Not anymore. The words were a challenge, a call to courage. Ethan took a breath, his decision made. Neither am I, he said, and for the first time he meant it. The next day, Ethan requested a meeting with Delgado. His hands shook as he stood in her office, but he spoke clearly. Ma'am, I'm gay. I don't want to hide it anymore. I want to do right by my squad, by myself. Delgado's expression was unreadable, then softened. You're a good soldier, Caldwell. This doesn't change that. You've got my support. The relief was overwhelming, but the real test came later. At the mess hall, Carter's voice carried, his words laced with venom. Ethan stood, his heart pounding, and faced him. "You've got a problem. Say it to my face," he said, his voice steady. The room went quiet. Carter smirked, but before he could speak, Ryan was there, standing beside Ethan. "He's not alone," Ryan said, his voice calm but firm. Malik and Lena joined them, their presence a wall of solidarity. Carter backed down, his bluster deflated. That evening, Ethan and Ryan sat at the park, the journal between them. "You wrote something new?" Ethan asked. Ryan nodded, opening the journal. He read aloud, his voice steady. "Love is also a victory, one worth every fight." Ethan's eyes stung, but he smiled. "You're right," he said. "It is." They sat there, hands entwined, the desert night soft around them. Ethan thought of Jamie, of the letter he'd finally send, filled with truth and hope. He thought of the squad, of Delgado's support, of Ryan's courage. He'd thought soldiers only knew hardness, but now he knew better. Love was a strength, a victory, and he was ready to fight for it.